Maria cried over one clean mug in a sink full of dishes. Not because the rest of the kitchen was still a disaster. She knew that. She could see it. The pan from 3 nights ago, the takeout containers, the general archaeology of a bad month. She cried because for the first time in 6 weeks, she'd washed something. One mug. And some part of her brain, the part that had been waiting for a reason to feel like a person again, apparently decided that was enough of a reason. She looked at me like she expected me to tell her that wasn't real progress, like she needed permission to count it.
I didn't give her permission. I told her it already counted. If you've ever felt embarrassed by how small your version of better looked, if you've ever downgraded your own effort in your head before anyone else got the chance to, this is for you. I'm Sarah. Some days I'm a psychologist in a 2-room office in Portland with plants that are somehow still alive. Some days I'm just a woman standing in her kitchen, wondering why folding one load of laundry felt like a personal victory and also felt like nothing at all, both at once. Today we're talking about small progress, not as a consolation prize, not as the thing you settle for when the big transformation doesn't show up, as the actual mechanism, the thing that was doing the work the whole time, while you were waiting for something more cinematic to arrive and validate you. Here's what I want you to sit with for the next few minutes. Most of us have a secret hierarchy in our heads. Big change is real. Small change is basically nothing, a rounding error, something you mention only if someone asks, never something you'd actually claim. And that hierarchy is quietly, systematically wrong. It's not just inaccurate, it's costing people their actual recovery, their actual growth, their actual lives, because they keep waiting for a version of progress dramatic enough to finally count. We're going to talk about why your nervous system doesn't care about your timeline. We're going to talk about the difference between patience and progress, because they get confused constantly, and they are not the same thing. We're going to talk about a client who taught me more about this than most textbooks did. And we're going to end somewhere useful, not a slogan, just something true enough to carry with you. If this is landing anywhere in you right now, stay a minute. And if you want more of these conversations, subscribing helps them find the people who need them. But mostly, I just want you to keep listening, because I think you're about to recognize yourself. Maria came to me 8 months into what she called not really trying anymore. Depression, though we didn't use that word for the first few sessions, she preferred the fog, which I thought was more honest than any diagnosis I could have offered her. She had a story she told herself, and it went like this. Real recovery would look like getting up at 6, going for a run, meal prepping on Sundays, finally applying for the promotion she'd been avoiding. Until that whole picture showed up intact, nothing counted. Not really. So for months, every small thing she did, showering, answering one text, eating something that wasn't crackers, got filed under not real, which meant it got no credit, which meant her brain never registered that anything had changed. She was actually improving. She just wasn't allowed to notice. The mug broke something open. Not because it was dramatic, because it was so small she couldn't lie to herself about why it mattered. She hadn't washed it to impress anyone, including herself. She washed it because some quiet, stubborn part of her wanted the counter to look a little less like evidence of how bad things had gotten. That's not nothing. That's the whole engine. Here's the false belief underneath almost everything I just described, that change happens in leaps, and anything smaller than a leap is basically standing still. It's a good story. It's just not how people actually change. Nobody wakes up one day fundamentally different. What actually happens, and I say this as someone who used to believe in leaps too, who wanted her whole life fixed in one decisive physics-brained equation, is that change happens in almost invisible increments. And then one day you look back, and the distance between who you were and who you are now is enormous, and you can't point to the single moment it happened, because there wasn't one. The leap is a myth we tell ourselves, so we have permission to dismiss the boring, unglamorous, actually effective stuff. Waking up 10 minutes earlier, sending the email you'd been avoiding, saying one true sentence in a hard conversation instead of the usual deflection. None of that photographs well. None of it makes a good before and after. So we file it under doesn't count and keep waiting for the leap,
which conveniently never arrives, because leaps were never the mechanism to begin with. I want to get a little clinical here, but I'll keep it plain, because the jargon usually just gets in the way of the actual point. Your nervous system doesn't learn from intentions. It learns from repetition. It learns from evidence. Every time you do a small, doable thing and actually complete it, you're giving your body proof that you're someone who follows through. That proof accumulates slowly, almost imperceptibly, the same way trust accumulates in any relationship. Nobody trusts someone after one grand gesture. People trust the person who shows up in small, consistent ways over time. You are, in a very real sense, in a relationship with yourself. And that relationship is built the same way every other one is. Not through the occasional dramatic apology, but through the 1,000 small, unremarkable moments where you either showed up for yourself or you didn't. This is why the mug mattered more than a hypothetical 5-mile run Maria didn't take. The mug was evidence her body could actually use. The 5-mile run was still just an idea. Did you even try? That's what I heard myself almost say to my son one evening, standing in his doorway, looking at a math worksheet with exactly 2 problems finished and a bed that was half made in the specific way that only a 10-year-old can half make a bed. One corner tucked with real intention, the rest just sort of gestured at. I caught myself before it came out, because I recognized the tone. It was the tone I use on myself. 2 problems isn't the whole worksheet. I know that. But 2 problems is not nothing, and a bed that's a third made is not the same as a bed that's a wreck. And somewhere along the way, I'd absorbed this idea that partial effort deserves a kind of contempt that full effort doesn't, as if trying halfway is worse than not trying at all, instead of being, obviously when I actually think about it, more than not trying at all. I sat down next to him instead, asked what made the other problems hard. Turns out he understood the material fine. He was just tired. And 2 problems was what tired but trying looked like that night. I think about that a lot, how easily I would have extended grace to him, and how rarely I extend the same grace inward. People confuse these 2 constantly, and the confusion causes real damage. Patience is passive. It's waiting something out, gritting your teeth until circumstances change on their own. Patience says, I'll just get through this. Progress is active, even when it's microscopic. Progress says, I did one true thing today that moves me half an inch closer to who I actually want to be. The trouble is, small progress often gets mistaken for patience, because from the outside they can look identical, someone sitting quietly, not visibly transforming. But internally they are opposite postures. One is enduring, the other is building. If you've been calling your small efforts just getting by, I'd ask you to look again. Getting by implies nothing is changing, but if you've washed one mug, sent one email, had one honest conversation you would have avoided a year ago, that's not endurance, that's construction. It just doesn't look like construction because there's no scaffolding, no visible frame, nothing to photograph. The listener's confusion is usually this. They think small effort without visible results means the effort isn't working. But results are often the last thing to show up, not the first. The first thing that changes is always internal, and it's always quiet. I had a client years ago. I'll call him Daniel, though that's not his name, and the details are blended from more than one person I've sat with, who was 6 months sober and furious about it. Furious because his brother had gotten sober for real, his words, in what felt like an instant, one decisive rock bottom followed by a clean break. Daniel's had been messier. 2 relapses, a slow crawl, months of white-knuckling one day at a time with no dramatic before and after to point to. He said, it doesn't feel like it counts if it wasn't clean. I asked him to count differently. Not days sober in a row, days he chose not to drink, period, including the ones that came after a relapse, including the ugly, non-linear ones. When we counted it that way, the number was enormous. Hundreds of individual choices made under real pressure that his old accounting system had thrown out because they didn't fit the tidy narrative he thought recovery was supposed to have. He wasn't behind his brother. He was doing something his brother never had to do, rebuilding trust in himself after breaking it, repeatedly, in public, to himself. That's a harder kind of progress. it's also still progress. Here's the almost funny part, if you can find the humor in it, which most days I can. We treat slow progress like a character flaw, as if the speed of our healing is a referendum on our worth. Nobody would say this out loud, phrased plainly. I am only allowed to respect myself if I improve quickly, and yet that's the operating logic underneath so much self-criticism.
Part of this is cultural. We live inside a constant highlight reel of other people's leaps, the ones that made a good post, a good before and after, a good story. Nobody posts the mug. Nobody posts the 2 mouth problems. So the record we're comparing ourselves against is, structurally, a lie. It only contains the dramatic stuff, because the small stuff was never filmed. And part of it is older than any app. It's the belief a lot of us learned early, that we only deserve care or credit or rest once we've proven something big enough to earn it. Effort that doesn't produce a visible reward starts to feel embarrassing, almost, like you're not supposed to admit you're proud of something so small. I'd like to gently suggest that the embarrassment is the thing worth examining, not the smallness. The nervous system doesn't read calendars. There's a phrase I use often in the office because it's just true. The nervous system doesn't care what looked reasonable on paper. It doesn't know you should be over something by now. It doesn't know your friend recovered faster, or your sibling changed careers in one bold move, or the version of you from 5 years ago would have handled this differently. It only knows what it's actually experienced, over and over, until the experience becomes belief. This is why so much advice about just decide to change falls apart in practice. Deciding is cognitive. Believing is somatic. It lives in the body, and the body only updates through repetition, through pattern, through enough small proofs stacked on top of each other that eventually the old belief can't hold its shape anymore. So when you do the small thing, the one that doesn't feel like enough, you're not failing to make a leap. You're doing the only kind of work that was ever going to reach the part of you that actually needed convincing. Not every session in this line of work ends in a breakthrough. Most don't. Most are just maintenance. Showing up, saying the hard, true thing out loud one more time, leaving slightly lighter than you arrived. A woman came in last spring, another composite, pieces of several people, and told me, almost apologetically, that all she'd done that week was not call her ex at 2 a.m. That was the whole update. No revelation, no new insight, just one night or the impulse showed up and she didn't act on it. She said it like it was too small to bring up. I told her that single choice, made once, under real pressure, with no one watching, was worth more than most of the insights people bring in here. Insight is cheap. Insight doesn't cost you anything at 2 a.m. Restraint does. She looked almost surprised to be taken seriously. I think that surprise is common. I think a lot of people are quietly doing genuinely hard things and have never once heard anyone say out loud that it counted. So let's go back to the mug, and to the math worksheet, and to Daniel's messy, non-linear counting, and to the 2 a.m. phone call that didn't happen. None of these are consolation prizes. None of them are what you settle for while you wait for the real change to show up. They are the real change. They're just not wearing a costume you'd recognize as one, because we were taught to recognize progress by its size, not by its direction. Small progress is the only kind that was ever actually available to any of us in real time. The leap is something you only ever see afterward, in hindsight, stitched together out of hundreds of moments too small to have felt like anything while they were happening. If you washed one dish this week, if you had one honest conversation you'd normally avoid, if you got through one hard hour without doing the thing that would have made it worse, I'd like you to let that count, not as a placeholder for something bigger later, as the thing itself. I'll be honest, I still have to remind myself of this. Some weeks, the only evidence I have that I'm doing okay is that I showed up for the people who needed me and went to bed without falling apart. It doesn't always feel like enough. I've decided to stop waiting for it to feel like enough before I let it count. If any part of this found you tonight, I'm glad you were listening. And if you'd like to sit with more of these conversations, I'd love to have you back. Whatever small thing you did today that you were about to dismiss, it counted. Start there.